Welcome one and all to the Ballatallcost podcast. We're back. We have an esteemed panel here. We have a special guest in Ade. No, I'm joking. We have Ade on today. No, I love when Ade's on. My son's favorite. You know, he said this before. So there you go, Ad.
Thank you.
Edgy and Dan, aka Just a Dad. How are we doing, gentlemen? I'm going to start with Dan, because your team were doing up parade and then some madness happened. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's bank holiday, so we're good. Nice, relaxing day. Yeah, not great scenes I've seen on the line today up in Liverpool. Obviously, our thoughts and condolences if that is going to happen, or
You look bad.
Yeah, I saw a video and it looks like all those lemming games where the guys. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not giving too much publicity, but yeah, it don't look great. And but on a brighter note, we celebrated yesterday. I see there's some good vibes today as well. And then, I was ashamed I wasn't there. Unfortunately, I wasn't there today. I was going to go with my son, but we changed our mind because of travel arrangements. But, we're here, we move. It's another great week. We get to discuss great things and, enjoy life.
Good. Ad, you look like you got a tan, my friend. How's it going?
Yeah, you know me. Black of the berry.
Whoa. It's not that type of podcast.
Oh,
yeah?
sorry.
I told you about this Magic Mike Live Chocolate City stuff.
See, Deji there's just like, what's going on here? No, all good, very good. Just touched back down early, mid-afternoon, should I say, but all good. Sorry, I know that Liverpool done the parade. I was watching some of it on Sky Sports, but I didn't hear about some of that other stuff. But we just hope people are well and stuff like that. But yeah, it's good to be back on. I haven't been on in a while. Really missed it, but I just got to salute all you guys, Andrew, Deji, Dan, because you are just holding it up massively, absolutely massively there. And let's just keep going, keep working, keep pushing this forward, because I just think there's a massive message going out to parents, parents of boys, parents of girls that are in, I wouldn't even just say just football, but even in sport alone. And I think they're gaining a lot of information from this. So well done to you guys.
100%, hopefully. 100%, thank you.
And to Deji, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, because you've had the last couple of weeks from, heaven in terms of football. Yeah. So we touched on the glory a couple of weeks ago, last week with your son, and you touched glory again. We touched glory. I heard you were down at the parade. I didn't holler you. I was probably on the other side, but talk to me, man. How you doing?
Bro, I am on cloud 9. Having suffered throughout the season, both grassroots and professionally. I've not really suffered that like that, but they say he who laughs best, and what a way. I mean, 17 years for my club and our club, and to see them pick up a trophy and to save for what, quite frankly, is one of the dustiest seasons I've ever seen in my life. 17 defeats, 22 defeats, 17th in the Prem. Mate, I can go around and politely tell all the Arsenal people them to hold that.
I'll give you a yellow card. I'm going to rescind it.
Sorry, I don't even mind being sent off. That's how much I'm on cloud 9. But no, I'm just kidding. It's been a great week, for real. It's been a great week. Thank you for asking.
Good. Well, you know what? I kind of echoed that, because it has been a long time. The parade was nice. And let's not talk about that too much, obviously, because we've had some negativity today. But yeah, it's good to get that one over the line, and let's see what happens in the summer next season. But we've got to talk about some stuff. But before we talk about stuff, I want to thank all the listeners that keep on tuning in, that keep on subscribing, that keep on following us on TikTok and on Instagram. Please keep up the good work. Please share the pod. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We know you're true to this, so introduce somebody who's new to this. That being Ed, I think it's time to discuss a topic that's close to your heart, Deji. Bad coaches. And I think I'm going to be in the firing line here a little bit, being one of the coaches on the pod. Dan put his jacket back on the shelf. And I think it's all going to come my way. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrew, and big up to my fellow panelists, Ade, Dan. Look, I think I wanted to focus on the coaches because I feel like we've done a lot of work and we've had quite a few discussions so far about parents and what to look out for. And we've also done clubs in focus. But one of my biggest bugbears is that it feels like the grassroots game, obviously nothing is ever perfect, but there are some flaws and some kinks that I feel like if coaches could look at and address, it would make the experience, it would make the journey a lot more pleasurable. And I say that because I feel like over the last, since COVID in particular, I think it's fair to say some coaches have become gods. Yeah, the way that they're revered by the parents at their clubs, the way that they revere themselves, the way that they move, the way that they shake. And you sometimes have to wonder who holds the power here. Is it the parent or is it the coach? And so there's a number of things I wanted to for us to kind of discuss. And I think we can just take each of those things or each of those points in turn. So I think my first point for me, that has to be one of my biggest bugbear with coaches. And I can see a lot of the people that are listening to the pod now, they're already shaking and they're nodding their head in agreement because this has happened to you. I can't stand the poor communication from coaches. The poor communication kills me.
Ade, why are you nodding?
Yeah, Ade knows. He knows what.
No, Ade has to be careful here because I coach his son. So I want to know if he's nodding, what he's nodding about.
Nah, it's for me. It drives me mad. You can text a coach, they don't get back to you. You can text them on Monday, you're not hearing from them till Friday, Saturday. So that is an issue for me. Or I think the other issue is that they feel like they don't have to explain anything. So certain decisions get made with your child. It could be positionally, it could be whether they're playing or not. And they just do. You get me? They don't even give you a warning. They don't even say, okay, Ade, I've noticed this about your son. So because of this, I'm going to do this. Or we're thinking of doing this. Those conversations are not taking place. They're just sticking kids in positions, no conversation. We don't know whether they think it's something that they're seeing in their game. They're just doing it. And it's starting to drive me a little bit mad with the power and the lack of communication. And I do feel that even like something as basic as you've got games coming up, tournaments coming up, we as parents, we need to organize ourselves. We need to know so we can put it in our diary so that we know that what we're doing, because some of us, we have other children as well. You know, we have to get someone to look after them, might be a family member, this and that. So the quicker we get the information, the quicker we can organize ourselves. But getting information the night before, for me personally, that na make it. I can't stand it. But it does feel like some coaches, I feel that they need to learn communication skills because also it will be good for their businesses. Like if you're able to respond back to parents, let them know, I would feel a lot better. But this kind of going on, you know, we've had matches as well. I like guys, we've had matches where maybe the matches didn't go according to plan or maybe the tournament didn't go quite well. And the coaches don't even want to have a conversation. They don't even want to conversate with us, you know, like as if there's tension. So I guess for me, but I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing nodding. Andrew's smiling, so I can tell that you've probably had similar experiences. But how did you feel about the level of communication from your clubs? And not your clubs directly, but in the main, you know, and how they deal with us.
All right, I'm going to jump in. I'm not going to speak first. I just want to preface something. I was nodding because I'm waiting keenly to hear what Ade is going to say. Because if he's going to throw me under the bus, we're going to have work. No, but just preface. You're speaking about your son's club coach, yeah, or coaches.
No,
For
I'm
your
just talking
grassroots,
about
or you work
coaches
in
yeah,
general. So
in
one-to-one
general,
coaches,
not
small-sided.
specifically
Okay,
Alpha.
so
Yeah.
general coaching. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna hand over to Dan or Ade because I'm in the defense, so I'm gonna let the I'll just defend.
I'm not, I think for me, my experiences, I think it comes down to a bit mature. You know, this day and age, this social media age where people don't feel they have to communicate if they want to. I think maturity. A lot of these coaches we talk about, if you look at where their background is and what they're doing in the age bracket, they're not of a certain age. So the lack of understanding and respect to communicate is like they don't have it. It's like imagine that I have a teenage son and he'll read, I'll message him, yeah, hey, leave him in blue with no response. Yeah. So I'm like, yo, what is this? And that's a bugbear of mine. If you've read my message and I know you've seen it, don't ignore me. Because now we're gonna unstop. Now see you next time I see you, we'll have to have a conversation differently. Yeah. But I think it's just that day and age, that age where we are now where people are not used to communicating with I'm not gonna say respect in a bad way, but that level of respect, understanding. If I text you, the common courtesy is just to say something back, acknowledge it, and just don't leave me in blue.
You see that there? Sorry, Dan. You see that? Is that a generational thing? Do we feel like that as our generation? But is that okay for their generation?
I think for them it's normal. For us, we're raised differently. Like if we come from the house phone era, so you can't hide. If the phone, you pick up the phone, you know you're in the house. Yeah. It's not about text messages. It's like, oh, you're in the house. I did not miss your call, or did not. I know you're at home now. We know you're there. This and it. Oh, I didn't see it. Or you know what? I got so many messages on my phone. Like, look, I can show you. But you're there, but I missed it because I get so many messages. It's just that whole. It's always an excuse and a reason. But I will say in your defense, Andrew, my experience with you, yeah, I didn't have the issue of communication. So I don't know what Ade's going to say.
Thank you.
But for me, I haven't had that as such.
I don't know what he's going to say. He was nodding away like a good one there. I don't know what he's going to say.
Know. Maybe how you treat me, different way you treat Ade, I don't know. Maybe our friendship's a bit different compared to yours and Ade's. So that's why he's nodding. I was shaking, not nodding.
No, I was nodding because I think Deji's brought up a real point, but I think you need to go wider than your immediate club, and you need to look at the whole scope of football. Football is, as we know, it's a very emotional game, and coaches, not only in level of age, how old they are, but where they are on their communication with individuals. Because, as you know, I think Rio Ferdinand said, 30% of the work you do on the pitch can be done by just communicating. Sorry, he said communication can save you 30% of running. And then that, if you filter that in on a wider scope, like Deji said, if coaches are often communicating to parents of what the plan is, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and what is the plan for your son in the team, or around the team, in however that may look, that gives a parent a good idea of a good idea of how they want to move forward, or how they see the development going for their child. Because every parent cares about the development of their child. A lot of that development is going to come from the feedback, most likely on a regular basis, from the coaches. So I know we're talking mainly about grassroots, but even in the academy system, from what I know, sometimes the feedback is non-existent. And I think most of you have experienced that. And then if you bring it into the grassroots area, and Deji was like, who's got the power here? In a lot of the cases, power is given to the coach, because the coach is the one making decisions, and the decision maker in any form of life is the person who has the power. He correlates, or she correlates, all the information that they want, and then makes a decision on what's going to happen next. Parents know and understand this. Children don't understand it yet at that level, but will start to understand it, whether they're playing or not, or for what reason or not, and so on and so on. So there is a bit of a big triangle with it, but that triangle can be easily formed out with consistent communication.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of come back on that, and yeah, look, I totally agree, but I'm just thinking to myself that, you know, when you're seeing coaches, maybe it needs to be more of a negotiation. There needs to be constant dialogue, because they have an opinion, you have an opinion. You know your child better than the coach. The coach might say, you know what, your child is a defender. Deep down, you think maybe centre mid, and I think that debate needs to happen. But what's not happening and I think that should be happening at grassroots. I can, to a semi extent, take it at academy level. Although I still think there should be space to have those conversations with those academy coaches. But at grassroots level, those conversations are not happening. Things are just being done. No negotiation, no idea, the history of the boy, where the or girl, where they've been playing. They're just randomly 7 aside. Someone that's been playing right wing for the last 3 years is now all of a sudden left back. For me, how does that make sense? What are you seeing? And the thing is, you know, one of the worst things for me is if you're not, like, why am I going to allow my son to play in a position at grassroots that might even be hampering their progress? You know, for me, sometimes it feels like we have a race against time, and that's why we need the coaching to be on job. We ain't got time to be, I don't know. We ain't got time to be wasting on something you know ain't gonna work. If that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it is. So I've heard this on more than one occasion. So see, coach, you're saying about what coaches see and what we don't see. Some of these coaches, this is their business, and I've heard this twice now. Like, no, more than probably 2 or 3 times, where I've heard coaches say, "Look, I wouldn't come into your place of work and tell you to do your job." Yeah. And I looked at him like, so the ultimately saying is, as their coaches, and this is their job, as parents, they don't feel we should have an opinion or have the right to tell them, actually, this isn't working for my son. Yeah. And some of these coaches work in academy football. So what they do, they try and replicate what happens in academy football. So, you know, in academy football, you're quite fearful or apprehensive in terms of how you approach coaches. I want to know what's going on with my son. So they take that kind of environment or ethos away from the professional background in the professional clubs into the grassroots situation. And ultimately for them, they're not all around professional in those areas. You get it? So they want to take, I don't communicate with you because at academies you don't get the luxury of doing it. So that's how we do it here. But then, and the aspects how they talk to children and to parents are not the same way in that environment. So it's not really balanced, and they get confused in terms of, like you said, the God and the power they believe they have.
Yeah.
So as much as it's their business, without a consumer, it isn't a business.
Yeah. So I want to jump in there from a coach's defense now. Shoot me down if you will. But the point you made, Dan, I was going to jump on that in the sense that we are operating, and we've said this before, we're operating at an elite space, right? So the next step for a lot of our boys, the boys that our sons play with, or for our sons, is academy football. So that prep for academy football needs to be there to a degree. It needs to be there, right? And I understand why some coaches don't have discussions or negotiations. Now, I think there should be some communication. I believe at academy level, there should be some communication. But one thing it won't be at an academy level is a negotiation. That's not going to happen. So I think at elite grassroots level, I can understand why coaches don't have a negotiation. I think a discussion is fine. A negotiation is not going to happen. So, for example, I can say Ade's boy. Now, I know our communication directly with Ade's boy hasn't been there this season, but there's mitigating circumstances there, right?
Mm.
For that. But what we've done as an example is we've given reports to all of the boys. Ade's son hasn't got his yet because they've been away. That will come, and it will kind of outline what we saw this season, what we liked, what we need him working on, and what he needs to work on next season. And if that is directed and related to positions, it will be based on positions and put in a report. And then we'll have a discussion about it afterwards, right? Because I think it's important that, especially as the pitch sizes change and positions develop and offsides come into it. I even spoke to your boy at the tournament last week, or 2 weeks ago, and I said, you should have made that run. Then I said to myself, you don't know to make that run because you haven't played in that position enough in order to understand that's the run you need to make. So we need to work on that as coaches. We need to say, these are going to be your positions for the next season, and we need to give them the tools in order to succeed in those roles. So I think there is conversations that need to be had. I'm just not sure about the negotiations. But the other point I was going to make about the lack of communication, the godlike behaviors, I think what you're describing typically happens when there's a badge involved. Yeah, is that true or not? When the badge of a pro club is involved?
No, you'd be
No?
surprised. You'd be surprised, yeah.
Really?
You'd be surprised,
Yeah?
Sometimes I think yes, I think the ones with badges definitely it's gonna be there. But I think Ade and Dan alluded to it. I also think it's a generational thing. Like I think you were making that point, and actually when you do look at it, some of the ones that we're dealing with, they are so young. That maybe that's just the Gen Z generation. They just don't communicate well.
But do you think there's not a directive to them to say you don't need to speak, just do, and if anybody's got any issues, they'll come higher up the food chain?
I think there's a genuine nervousness to deal with parents. And I was doing a job the other day where they were talking about that thing about, with the Gen Z generation, you've got to WhatsApp them first. Are you available? Before they respond back, yeah, give me a call. But you couldn't just cold call them and have a conversation. That doesn't happen. And I think so there is a generational gap. But I find it very...
Sorry, it's funny you use the word cold call. That's what phones are there for, to call people.
Yeah, to call, exactly. But you do a cold call on some of our coaches, they're not picking up. Like, they're not going to pick up, which is like, what? How can you not pick up? We need to chat to you, and this is your business, by the way. This is your business, and you're not picking up. So that is where it becomes a bit mad for me. But I think there's a reticence about communicating with the parents, assumptions being made that we might not be happy. Oh, but also maybe some insecurities. I think maybe they're insecure, feeling that if we ask too many questions, they might get found out. And let's be real, some of the coaches that we're dealing with, and this might be a cheeky statement, maybe we know more ball than them, just by the fact of age. No, I'm not. I like we kick ball. No. We've known ball. We've studied ball. Do you know what I mean? So maybe they can sense that in the way that we.
Yeah. There's difficult conversations, right? There's difficult conversations that a generation that don't have the best communication skills and who are not necessarily old enough to have different experiences of handling different people. They don't want to have those conversations. And especially if somebody does have experience, I get that. One thing I will add to the lack of communication, sometimes the lack of communication can be because there are many moving parts, right? Before a coach can make decisions, right? If you look at where we are now in the season, where we're at retain and release, if you like, trialing stage, movement around players, communication may not be there just because they can't speak on things before other things happen, right? There's a process that needs to take place in the background. And doesn't mean they can't say anything, but they may not be able to give all the information that a parent might be seeking there and then. And that's the only last bit of defense I'm going to offer for communication for bad coaches.
Okay.
I think sometimes as well is, I know we've got the title as bad coaches, which it's a bold statement. And in any industry you go into, you're going to get good and bad. So there's obviously bad coaches out there, and there's obviously good coaches. And I think there's coaches that are good that don't need to actually do too much. And what I mean by that is they might have a great set of players around them, or they just might know how to say one or two things that just gets everyone at it. And it's great. Then you've got another side where you've got bad coaches who have got the wrong attitude, they've got the wrong tone of voice, they don't know how to speak to the kids, they don't know how to encourage the kids, or it's just off. And I think I've seen it from both sides. But also there's the element of parents. And as this podcast is kind of directed at parents, depending on where you are on your football journey, you have to kind of assess things very quickly, because like Deji said, this is all time. Yeah, kids are young now, but they grow up, and you need to make maximum effort of the time that you've got. So if you know that, because in some cases, a coach may not be so good, but because you're like, oh, we just want to play in the team, he likes the players, or so on and so on, you want to stay in. Or the coach is good, but maybe they're not playing your child or something like that. You have to make a decision on to, do you need to stay or do you need to go to get the best for your child? Because if you take it into a school environment, it's like, do you want your child to stay in a bad school with bad teachers?
Nope.
Or would you say, no, we've got to move? You as the parent have to realize and assess, is this the best place for your child? It could be hard, but it could be the best place, or it could be easy and it could be the worst place. It's where you kind of have to add it up yourself, because in some cases, a lot of these coaches, like Dan said, they're running a business. And whether you're going to be there or not, someone else is going to come and pay that monthly fee for them. Do you see what I mean? And when it's a business, ultimately you're thinking about your bottom line, because that's anything that adds up. No matter who's there, your bottom line is the key factor in that.
To your point, Ad, you're saying use your eyes, use your ears, have conversations. If it's not right, if the coach won't speak and doesn't communicate, move on. Don't just hold out indefinitely because you like the club, you have aspirations of that coach placing your child here, there, or elsewhere. Make a decision as a parent and use your head rather than your heart.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. But also, and this comes to where you are on your football journey. Remember, there's all different types of parents and players out there. Some players are just there for a good time. Some parents are just there for the social interaction with other parents. So, some parents, they couldn't care if they win 10-0, lose 10-0. They'll bring barbecue, they'll bring cake, they'll bring custard, there's Coca-Cola, and everyone's hip, hip, hooray. Do you see what I'm saying?
I knew, this is what I miss, hip, hip, hooray.
Yeah.
But you brought custard this week.
Yeah. But you get some parents, and they're like, look, we've got a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan. We need to be at this stage for that and that stage for this. And, we want to be developing this and developing that. And that's okay as well. There's nothing wrong with either of the two paths. But again, there's coaches and there's clubs that are like that. Some are just there for the good time, and if we win, fantastic, and if we lose, as long as everyone has a good time, hip hip, high fives. And then there's some it's like, no, we need to develop. We want to push kids on. We want to get them on to see how many kids we can get on to the next level. And in some cases, a bit more urgency. So sometimes, as the parent, you need to assess where you are on your journey, and then where you want to get to, and if that's the right place for you at the right time. because I do also think there's certain coaches for certain kids. Some kids need a harder push. Some kids need a softer touch. And both of those different sets of kids can still develop into fantastic players and push on depending on who the coach is, what is said and when is said it. Do you see what I'm saying? Cut down. Yeah. You're on the left doing, take him on down the left, take him on down the left and cross it. To another kid, it's like, you know what, you're on the left wing. And I think if you take that player on, you've got a good chance of beating him and then cross it. It's the exact same statement put out in two different ways. Yeah. So you need to know what your kid is like. And some parents, in some cases, can struggle a bit. What is going to work best for our kids? A bit of a harder approach or a bit more center. And therefore, it's like, well, what coach is going to work best for my child to help them develop? Male or female.
That's something I noticed with my son. I knew that he probably responds better to a particular style of coaching, where it's less about the shouting, but more of a kind of explaining the reason why they want him to do certain moves. And I feel like that's what's brought the best out of him, especially this season, is that kind of approach. But yeah, sorry, Dan.
I'm gonna kind of go back to change what they say about having these communications. So, if like you're saying, a coach doesn't communicate or you're not hearing what you want to hear, maybe think about redirecting your path with your son or girl. On the flip side, you're gonna get some coaches that give you lip service. That are gonna tell you some nonsense that you think, okay, it sounds great, and you may remain there. So, as much as we're saying bad coaches, what might be a bad coach for you might be a great coach for me. So I think it always, circumstances and environments always gonna differ. Like, I know for a fact, certain coaches I can call, and they'll either answer the phone straight away or they'll call me back or whatever else. And there's other coaches that it's gonna be a waiting game. It's gonna be a long time either way. But necessarily, when my son's in that environment, working or training or playing, it may not be a bad environment to play in. So it's about, I think we take away that whole whether this coach is going to call me and be engaging with me or not, or whether or not when my son goes into environment, is he learning, is he developing, is he progressing, is he being challenged? So I think we can put emphasis on communication and text messaging and calls back, but the main thing is we speak about all the time is about how our boys develop, how they progress. And just because they don't text you or call you back, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the best coach for your son. And I think I looked at this quite stringently recently in terms of what season's finished now. So for me, this time of season is fun time, tournament season. So we do these things, but after tournament season, it becomes back to real work again. So it's different format of football, different learning, different lessons to learn in the game. So what do I do with my son? So I have to think about now who is the best coach of my son in terms of who's going to get the best out of him, who's going to challenge him. Are they going to surround him in an environment which means he has to work hard and it's not easy? Are they going to demand him to make sure his training levels are as good as his game levels? If I look at it in realistic real life, a text message isn't going to make a difference for me in that aspect on what I do. It'd be nice to have that transparency and clarity around everything, but I'm not really that. Ultimately, if I sit back and think about it, no, it's not a big thing for me. I can get texts every day about my son saying he's great and everything else. Then he goes and plays in a team. I just don't think it's the right environment for him. What is there isn't right. So I think what might be good for me might be bad for you and vice versa.
No, I hear that, Dan. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, and I think you make a valid point and you are right. And, we've been doing this a while. I do think there's something about parents not feeling afraid to ask questions, and I feel like we know environments where parents are afraid to just ask simple questions, or they feel like they can't say boo to a goose, and that should never be the case. But equally, coaches shouldn't be afraid of being able to answer questions. I understand they're busy. I understand they've got one-to-ones, group sessions and such like. But if it is a paid service, do you get what I'm saying? And therefore, I do think there's a certain level of professionalism that needs to be accompanied, and that is being available, not every day. I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie. There's some coaches I probably get on their nerves. I probably call them every day, and I can chat to them for hours every day, and maybe I'm a bit too invested in this, and I should get a life and I should get a job. But
Dej, do you call them after the do not disturb hours?
bro, I call my coaches all hours. All hours. You make the mistake of picking up.
Wait. You wonder why they don't call you back.
Deji will have an idea at 1:45 in the morning about playing the ball out the back and then swinging it over to the. And he's
100%.
ringing. He's ringing, man.
Ringing, sending videos.
So this is what Juventus did.
But I feel like it's a learning. I feel like they can't have all the answers, because I try and put myself in their shoes, and let's think about it logically. Like, I don't give a damn about the year below. I don't give a damn about the year above, but I do give a damn about my child's year. And so when it comes to the kids in his year group, I know the so-called ballers, non-ballers, middle ballers. I'm inside out, and I guess pretty much all of us and those listening, they can agree and they can nod. If you're really invested in the grassroots game, the way that some parents are, then you know what's what. But those coaches can't be expected to know what you know. How would they? Especially if they don't have a child in your child's age group. Andrew, you're different because you've got a child in our age group.
Yeah.
No, we all of our children are in the same age group.
Yeah, but I think you're saying from a coach's perspective. So
right, yeah.
I guess as a coach, I kind of have a pulse of where all the boys are, where my son is. And if I'm coaching your boy, for example, or Dan's boy, I haven't coached Dej's boy, but I can then really relate to the boys, his level against other levels in the age group, pretty much across East London, Essex, right? Because I'm exposed to all of those boys. So I think I have that kind of experience, and then I have my own coaching experience as well, right? And then what we're trying to achieve as a club as a whole, and for each of our boys individually, right? So we have plans for each of those boys. So one of the things I was going to say is, as a coach, what I want from my coaches are two things, really. One is do they want my boy to win? If they don't want my boy to win, then I don't want them as my son's coach, first and foremost. Secondly, do they have a plan for my son? Yeah, and that doesn't mean a plan to put that child into an academy, because they may not be an academy coach or academy scout, but do they have a plan for my son on his football journey whilst he's with that coaching school, that small-sided group session, or ultimately that team? And they're the two things I look for. And if they fail on either of those, then I'm not interested. That's me.
Yeah. So for example, I know this is back to about coaches, but I think that also goes hand in hand, I guess, with talent ID on where coaches ID certain players. And it's crazy to be fair that I've been at home and I've had calls from scouts from clubs asking me, "Do you know about this boy? What do you know about him? Can you tell me about it?" I'm like, that's your job, right?
Yeah,
that's your job, right? And I'm like, why am I getting calls of people at professional clubs about boys when no one's offering me no job as no scout or talent ID or spar? I'm available, by the way, but I'm just saying, no one's offering me no jobs. Yeah. But I think, again, we spoke about this weeks ago about lazy recruitment and lazy scouting. So I think we are invested as parents. We are invested because we spend how many weeks and hours and days with our boys at different football events and different teams, so we kind of know what's going on. But I just think a bit of a cheek. Like, I'm not I'm there because of my son. I'm not then gonna do a scout's job for them. If you ask me, have I heard of this boy? That's great, but don't ask me to tell you what his strengths and weaknesses are, and how can I contact him or his parents.
Imagine.
That's not my job.
No, but you know what? Give yourself a pat on the back first and foremost, because that's respect that they're putting on your name. But that's lazy on their behalf, and that's poor.
Can I come in on that? Yes, I would say that's lazy. But then, in the same light, I would say that's not lazy. That's a normal industry thing to do. So what it is you use, for one, just like Andrew said, they're putting a lot of respect on your name. That means they trust your eyesight. They trust what you're going to tell them is certified. And then they're going to take that information, write it up in a report, and then give it to whoever's ahead of them to say, yes, let's bring him. No, let's not bring him in. And so that's one thing. Two is, if your eyes and ears, we all know most of these, I think, there was a documentary, I think I mentioned it to Andrew, and so there was a documentary on a podcast about 2 years ago of one of the top Chelsea scouts. And he said, when you're at a top academy club, you might have 15 to 20 scouts out on a weekend to cover London. As you go down the pecking order, you don't have as many scouts, i.e. other clubs do not have as many scouts. So you would use information of people that are in and around that area that have seen a kid, a boy or a girl that are playing, and then use their knowledge to make your own decisions if you're going to go and watch them or if you're going to invite them in or not. I think that happens in all industries, not just football. Everyone's word of mouth, should we say? That's the best way of saying it. It's word of mouth. And to be a trusted source to be able to do that, I think that's a fantastic thing. Yes, it's true. Even though it's word of mouth, someone's eyes could like something that do not match up to your eyes. Someone's eyes are, he's good at this, he's good at that, such and such, such and such. And then you go there and you think, he's good at those things, but that's not the thing that we want. The things that they don't mention is the thing that stands out to you, and you take that child on and stuff like that. So I think, again, I would agree with what you're saying, Dan, but also in the same part, I think that, it's something that just goes around. It happens even in the Premiership. It happens even at this day and age. More people, more Premiership clubs and top clubs around the world will go on the statistics of a player before maybe in some cases they even bring him in. They go on the statistics,
the data.
So there you go, the data. So now you hear players saying, "No, I've got to get my numbers up. I've got to get my pass completion up. I've got to get my runs up. I've got to get my tackles up. Because a lot of it now is based on data."
But that encourages safe passing and less creative passing.
I was gonna say that.
And that's what people are saying about the Premiership now. There was another sort of documentary or podcast, should I say? Sorry, I always get mixed up. Where people were saying that non-league is where a lot of fans are going to watch football now, because it's like what the old Premiership used to be. That's what they were. That's what one podcast was saying, and how there was a team in South London, non-league team, Dulwich, was it Dulwich or something? That was taking in 2,500 to 3,000 people.
Yeah, and also because of spectators, and also because of the prices are mad. You're talking about match tickets, for example, at Spurs. I think the cheapest is like 80, 90 quid. So you've priced people out. But you touched on the point that I wanted to talk about, which is that it does feel like nowadays the kind of coaching world is becoming a bit sheepish. And what I mean by that is a lot of people following the herd. When you look at all these coaches that are out there, if you go to most one-to-ones or most kind of group sessions, it's the same bloody stuff that they're doing with the cones. It's the same step over shift. L turn. The fact that you can call it an L turn, an Iniesta, Maradona, for me, there's a problem. There's a problem there because because that means I can pick up the little FA level 1 kind of language book and tell you to go out there and do Harry Kane or whatever that is. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's a lack of creativity, a lack of individualism. And, football, Ada, you talked about back in the day, one of the things that we loved about the footballing game was the individuals, the Romarios, the Ronaldos of this world, the Maradonas, the Zinedine Zidanes. And right now, it does feel a bit robotic. Everyone's passing, everyone's doing the same sort of drills. I don't know for you, and I'm sure for those listening, I don't want my son to be like 1,000 others. I want my son to be my son and to express himself his way. But we've got coaches trying to force them to be something that they're not. And I was hearing someone said, my brother-in-law actually said the other day, that we can't all be Neymar. And I was like, that's so true. What happened to having a John Terry? What happened to having your Neymar? What happened to having your Paul Scholes? It almost feels like they've all got to be the same. And that, for me, speaks lack of vision, lack of individualism, just following what you're seeing online, just following the herd because you think that's what's working, that's how I'm going to get my money. And that was my pushback on it's their business. But yeah, it's your business, but make sure you're doing your business right. Don't just be following the herd, because it does feel like nowadays every person and their dog can pick up and set up a football team and say they're a coach. Sorry, I'm being very combative tonight, but
Dej, you know what? Yeah. Dej, I want to talk to you. I want to answer that, but it's going back to what Andrew said earlier about when he spoke to LA Sun recently, a couple of weeks, about making a run. You should have made that run, yeah. I have to in the same tournament as with side by side of Andrew, and we spoke about the same thing, not just about LA Sun. There's another boy or two boys that did the same thing. And that's because when you play football and you played football, you understand where certain boys maybe need to be.
You're on mute, Dan.
How their body shape is going to go. Yeah. So sometimes we get these coaches that do level 1 or badges and stuff, but the closest they've been to a football pitch is on an FA course, on a training pitch. Yeah. So they don't actually understand what it's like to make the run, even to be hit by a challenge. Like not even playing, actually being hit by someone hard. Yeah, and realize how to avoid those challenges. Yeah. So we got in coaches that are coaching not just our boys across the country, even in academy football, that guys that have never played football at any level of any standard, but they're giving instructions to these young boys. You should do this better, do this L turn. But can they do the L turns? Yeah. Can they manipulate the ball the same way we see the boys across the country from ages of 7, 8 doing? And some of them can't, because they can't. They're not fit for purpose. Yeah, some of these coaches.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, you've got a point on that, Dan. And I think all that is going to come back to the financial basis. Is, again, for someone like yourself,
I think I've gone.
It's going to be hard for them to say, "Oh, Dan, we need you 4 times a week at 6 hours a day, and we're going to give you, I don't know, 12 or 15 grand a year."
Well, I don't know what's happened there, guys. I don't know what happened. I just froze. I don't know what happened.
No, we can hear you though. We've been
we can hear you.
Yeah, I think the last thing I said was like, I need coach that can fit for purpose.
Yeah, we heard you.
Yeah, we heard that.
Yeah.
And I was just saying, a lot of that is going to come down to the financial element, especially if you're talking about in the academy system, because I think when it comes to the grassroots system, I think ultimately most grassroots, I would even say 90% of even 95% of grassroots coaches are parents. So they're coming in because their son and their daughter is playing in the team, and then they're running the team, but also being a parent and in trying to, get an understanding with the other parents, the kids, their own kid. So they're juggling that balance of being a coach, being a dad, and I think that in itself is its own challenge, which give them credit, because that is extremely hard to do, because you've got dad at 8 o'clock in the morning, you've got coach at 9:30 in the morning, and then you've got dad again at 11 o'clock in the morning. That is a very difficult thing to do. Then you've got, Dave could be my mate at 7:30 in the morning. Now he's my kid's coach at 9 in the morning, and then he's back to being my mate at 10:30 in the morning. So there's a balancing act with that, and that's very difficult when you take it into the academy level, where a lot of these coaches are getting paid. In most cases, unless you're probably at the top level, or the clubs who have got the right finance to be able to facilitate that, in most cases you'll see a lot of younger coaches, because you can give them less money and they will still do a job. So someone like you, Dan, who might have ideas and formats of how we can push certain things forward and so on, in the hierarchy system, in some cases they just want to put a jacket there, and then that jacket will do what needs to be done, and fulfill the program of what the hierarchy want them to do. And obviously that person, I say a jacket, that's quite rude. Let me take that back. That person will do what they know in the best way they can from the teachings that they've been given by the hierarchy, to try and fulfill what the hierarchy want. Not so much for what you or your child wants, but for what the hierarchy want. And now that's filtered into, like you were saying, Dej, where the Romarios, where the Ronaldos, and football, especially at the top level, has become very systemized. I don't think that's such a bad thing. I do think, yes, in some cases we've lost some of the flary kind of players, but I don't think that the football system, the changing of the football system, whether you want to put that down to Pep Guardiola or whoever, is such a bad thing. I think football is still an efficient game. I think it's become more efficient. I think the money and the business around football has pushed it that way, and it's only going to get more and more like that, considering that it's the biggest sport on the world. It's the absolute biggest sport on the world. And that's why every man, dog, and rabbit is trying to get their child to progress into that.
But Ade, then what that would mean is that it's going to be harder to spot talent, because if everyone's doing the same thing or can do the same thing, they make the same type of runs, they kick the ball the same way, they pass the same way, their understanding of the game is pretty similar. How does one stand out without going harder? Do you get what I'm saying?
Before you answer that question, think of Eze, think of Dele Alli, and think of why these two were not at Premier League clubs and why they had to come up a different way. When you answer that question, sorry, Des. Just to add further.
How do you get spotted? I think ultimately there is that element. You have to go harder. Secondly, which I come back to, which I said in the earlier part, you have to analyze, is this the best place for your child? Is this the best place for your child to be, considering you know what your child's good at and what they need to work on? Is this where you are the best place for them to go and develop that? Because whether you like it or not, even if the game is systemized and it's becoming maybe more systemized, you're still going to need those mavericks on and around the pitch. You're still going to need your Ezes. You're still going to need your Cole Palmers. You're still going to need, sorry, who else did you mention?
Dele.
Yeah, you're still going to need those players that can unlock a key. You're still going to need those.
Can I just put a spanner in that, those Ade? So I hear you. Yeah. But the issue, maybe, and this might be a slightly biased opinion, but the issue then would be that we run the risk of that not happening for the children being brought up in this country. Because what I'm seeing is if they're all growing up in a similar vein, the Dele Allis, the Ezes are probably more likely to come from the continent or elsewhere than here, because we're not fostering an environment to allow them to be that. Because I get it, you're going to get the Ezes, the Dele Allis, the Enigmas that come through, but I'm not so sure with the way that Eze was getting rejected. I think it's almost safe to say the system weren't really feeling Eze, but Eze, in his own self-determination and grit and grind, was able to bust open the
and belief.
and belief, to get in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, agreed. But I think we're always going to hear a story. There's a kid. I say a kid. There's hundreds of young men probably right now between the ages of, let's say, 16 to 18 or 16 to 19 that have just been released. And out of those 100, you'll probably get 10 to 15% of them that are maverick players. But those maverick players at this time do not fit into the system of whatever academy club that they've got. So they've been released, and they might bounce around from one place to another place. And, hopefully they stay true it and they stay on their grind and on their grain, on their game, like you say, with the belief and stuff like that. There could be an avenue at some place. We've heard about players not taking on scholarships at Cat 1 Academy to go abroad and play first team football now, because they're like, no. Because I can see the path here. The path is, I do my scholarship, 2 years, you're going to give me a pro, I'm going to stay in the under 21s, and then after that it's the under 23s, and I could be 22 by that time, and there still might not be a chance. But, I'm at a Cat 1 club and it's fantastic, but I'm 22 now. And in football terms, that ain't young. 22 ain't young in football terms. In life terms, you could still be classed as a kid. But in football terms, that ain't young. So now you've got some kids that have been offered at Cat 1 clubs scholarships, and they're like, no, it's okay, we're not going to take that. And we've heard of this. And they've gone to Europe, like you said, and they've expressed themselves there in first team football, or in and around first team football, and they flourished. And their story has been told. But
and bought back for 75 million. So bought back for nearly 3/4 of like 100 mil.
Yeah, and it can happen. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be everyone's path. It really doesn't mean that. Some people's path is going to be through, the step-by-step academy. Some people's path is going to be through, the non-league, then into a first team at a Premiership or a Championship club, you see what I'm saying? There's so many different ways that it can happen, and I think being open to explore them, should those chances or opportunity become available to you, could be the way that your path takes to get to where you want to go to.
Sorry, just looking at that from a different aspect. So we said about boys with not taking up scholar offers and stuff. Is that more about maybe not being disillusioned about their own belief, to feel that they can push on further and they want more for themselves, rather than not wanting to settle in non-competitive football in the youth, in that the professional phase in between 18s to 23s or 21s? Maybe some of those players actually believe, and some of these boys are training around first teams at 15 years old. So they probably think, hold up, at 15, I was better than player X who's in the first team every week, and you want to give me a scholar, and I'm still have to wait around for another 2-3 years. Let me just go and play in Germany. Let me go and play in Belgium. Let me play in France, and I'll show the world that I am who I say I am, and not be disillusioned. And remember, they're going to earn decent money eventually. So going to Belgium or to Holland or to Germany, they're probably going to get paid a decent wage rather than getting paid their standard squad of ways they're going to get here. And they're getting trusted to play first team football in the limelight, playing in the Europa Conference, Europa League, and who knows what else comes after that. So I think
nothing wrong with the Europa League, just saying.
But you know,
well, I'm not saying. Well, as you know, one of your own academy products left. Your guys went and played out in Europe, did what he did, shot in the Europa League, came back, and he's back in the Premiership next year. So that's his belief again, as well as other issues, I believe, around his play style. But his belief,
his attitude apparently.
yeah,
but yeah,
no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Other things, but his self-belief to believe that he can leave where he was, go and be
100%.
successful in Europe, and come back, and full circle now. The Premier League will see him play next year.
Yeah, for real, they will.
Yeah. And I think as well, like you said, is a lot of it would have to come down to belief. Yeah, belief in yourself. One, belief in that there's more than one pathway. Two, first of all, belief in yourself. Two, belief that there's more than one pathway. Two, and then belief to even take the opportunity to, like, you know what, let me try this. Because, you know, at 16, 17, 18, if you're physically able to go out and play men's football, there's no way you're not going to be looked at more highly than someone in the under 21s or the under 23s, because as you know, when it comes to 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, you're not just looking to play good football, you're looking for a result. You've heard it, whether it be whatever Premiership team you want to count. 3 o'clock, by the time it gets to 4:45 on a Saturday afternoon, people want 3 points in the bag, because it means points. Points mean prizes. Prizes mean money. Money means investment.
Win bonus.
Yeah, exactly. It all adds up. So if you've got a kid that's playing in the under 21s or under 23s and he's fantastic, that's great. And if that's the development for their path to then move on to the first team or go out on loan and experience something else, there's nothing wrong with that. But then if you've got a kid who's 19, just like the other kid who's 19, who's in the under 23s or under 21s, but he's playing in the German League 2 or the what's the main German league? The Bundesliga, or he's playing in the League 2, but he's playing first team week in, week out, around in front of 5, 10, 15,000 people, and he's going out there and he's producing. He's going to be looked at more highly because he's really doing it at the level.
Yeah,
he's already.
There is something in that.
Yeah, there is. You know, obviously they call it now, but in my time is that you want to be playing men's football as early as possible. It
is men's football still. Sorry to cut you out, because what I think a lot of people probably don't appreciate, I know we've gone away from the bad coaches a little bit, but men's football, I'm just going to use this last point and then bring it back, but men's football is men's football in the sense that, we touched on it in this pod before, but just to be clear, let's forget the Premier League for a second, but Bundesliga 2, Championship, League 1, a win bonus can significantly impact your weekly take home as a professional footballer.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you could pay for bills or maybe not that week. That's a different level of mentality and responsibility. So a 16-year-old living at home with no care or no responsibilities whatsoever, compared to a 29-year-old man with 2 children, family, bills, loans, etc. That's 2 different sets of hunger, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 different sets of determination. So that's why I call it men's football. And that's why, to your point, if you can then prove to play at that level with that hunger, with that determination, with the ability, compare that to somebody else who's got the ability but has not played that level, the person who has taken that risk to play that level and succeeded will be looked on more favorable. And as we've seen with the fees that have prepared for the likes of Sancho, who went to Germany, took himself there and said, Man City, no, thank you. I want to prove myself. I'm going to show you I'm that man. And he did. I don't know what's happened now, but he did. But I want to bring back to Dej. Did you have any more points? Because I know we're going long.
No, I think we've kind of touched on all of the kind of final points, really.
Can I just
Dan's
say,
got one.
can I just say, just going back to whole bad coaches. So I'm coming back to grassroots football. So for me, is a grassroots bad coach. So I've got your son, Dej. Yeah, I know he's good, but I think he's outgrown me. He's outgrown my team. Am I going to be open enough and honest with myself and you and Andrew and say, I think it's best to leave my grassroots team, or do I want you to be a grassroots legend at my club?
When you say leave, are you saying get scouted or go to a better team?
I'm keeping it in grassroots because this whole scouting journey isn't going to happen for everyone, and the masses are likely to remain in grassroots.
So let's set the scene. You're saying, sorry to cut you down. You're saying I'm a coach of a 5th tier team in that league. So Echo, it would be England.
Yeah.
You've outgrown my team. You've outgrown England. Do I make a phone call to maybe a coach I know and a friend I know in Brazil and say, I think this boy should come to you?
Yeah. Or am I going to be selfish and make you a grassroots legend at my club? Yeah. So does that make you a bad coach for wanting to do the best?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like, just briefly, it should always be about what's in the best interest for the child first. It can't be about your club. It can't be about your business. It's about what does that child need. And we've talked about that today and we've unpicked it. I would expect any good, because I feel like with our children or kids' football journey in general, it cannot be a personal thing. It needs to be what is the right thing. And if the right thing for that particular child is to move up into a higher division because you believe that they're capable and should be challenged and stretched, then that coach should be advising those parents to do that pretty much before the parents make that move. I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that don't worry. But the problem you have is that coaches, how many times have you read, we are X team and we're looking to progress? That's the issue you're going to have, because every team wants to be playing as high as possible. For those that are in businesses, the higher they are, the more exposure they have and blah, blah, blah. But even for those not so high, everybody likes the pride of saying that my team is X and they're a good club. Yeah? But I think it has to be bigger than that. You have to look beyond that and say what is right for that young for that child, and order their steps accordingly. Definitely. But you got the challenge of everybody wants to be at the table, and we can't all be at the table.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I guess to answer your question, Dan, it depends at what age, I would say, because if they're under 7s and you've got that child could make a difference to the whole team and bring the whole team forward. And actually that team could then be in the top division anyway. But as the pitches get bigger, as the size of the teams get bigger, if you've got that exceptional player at 9-a-side or 11-a-side, as good as they are, they may not be able to bring that team to the highest table. So definitely at that point, a coach should say, do you know what? You've outgrown my team. Should say. Will they say? I don't know. Would I say? I would hope I would. Unfortunately, I haven't been in that position, so I can't say for sure. I have done, but I would hope I would.
I think in the world of theory, we're all going to say yeah. But I know in my hand, in the heart of my heart. No, I'm just saying in the real world, when those impacts and you're thinking on this, I think it's nice we'd like to think we did the right thing. We would like to think, but sometimes human nature takes over and we're going to want what's best, how we're going to promote our bet. So if that one player helps us get through situations, ultimately we'd like to think success comes with that in some way, which means another good player may come. He may bring his friend with him who's also good. Yeah. If you send that one boy away, that might be an opportunity gone to progress your team. And I just feel we're talking about coaches. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to be selfish in the world because you have to do what's right for you sometimes. But I just think some of these coaches, I think some of these coaches honestly feel or not don't have the foresight to think, you know what, I'm going to push this boy to another grassroots team because ultimately you're going to strengthen not maybe a rival or a local team that you don't really have a great alliances with. So are they going to push another team further away from them? So I just think it's a hard question, but I thought I'd put it out there because I just think it's a question that we may have to face ourselves at some point where our sons outgrow the team they're at one stage. And would you expect the coach to be happy for you to leave or actually push you on further?
But that should be the aim of the game. If you're doing your job properly, I mean, the organization that I work for in my personal life, I remember my old CEO saying, you know, you're doing your job well when technically there is no need for you. And I feel like if a grassroots or even academy, if they've done their job well, then those kids should be able to stand on their own 2 feet and be bigger than and be bigger than those clubs. If you've done your job well, you're not doing your job well if you've got big talent in your club and they're not reaching their full potential. And I would go as far as to say you're not doing your job well if you have a good team and they're not reaching their full potential. Because especially at the higher end, that's your job, that's what you're there for. And so you should be doing everything within your power to making sure that those young people are reaching their full potential. And I think that has to be always at the forefront of any decision that's being made at any club. Can we maximize that child's potential? Because if you can't, you should do the right thing and say, we can't, but we know a club that can.
Sorry, just to kind of round off what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've heard of everyone's kind of point of view, and I kind of have to go with Daniel. I just think it's kind of unrealistic that any club's going to do that. And I think we've all understood and known there's clubs out there, grassroots clubs, that would prefer for your child to stay with them than go anywhere. There's grassroots clubs out there that some of them, not all of them, some of them choose not to play against academy teams. So academy clubs don't go and pick up their players. That's the reality of it. And this is where I come back to. You as a parent have to look and see, is this the best place for your child? I don't think in any circumstances you could leave it up to them. Remember, they're with your child for on average 3 hours a week, maybe 4. You're with your child at least in the space of a week. You're with them 90% of the time, or 70% of the time, barring the times that they're in school. So the choice kind of has to really kind of come from you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think, it would be great in an ideal world, they push your child on or something like what Dan asked, you've outgrown us, or we think, you could go to a better team that's, 5 miles down the road, and possibly you're going to play against us and bang 3 goals in. No, that's not really.
Why do you have to put it like that? Why do you?
No, but it's not because that's not even done in the normal world. You could be working for unless someone comes to buy you. That's why there's transfer fees and stuff like that. We want to be compensated for what's going on. Even in the academy system. Kids are bought at certain ages from other clubs. They didn't just say, oh, you know what, we think he's way above what we've got. Can you guys take him? Because you can challenge him more. And, you know, it's all, we'll do a high five and a handshake. They're like, no, we want X amount of pounds from him. We want to be compensated. We've developed him from such and such to such and such. You've spotted a talent now, so we want to be financially compensated. This isn't hooray, hooray, hurrah. This is.
I was waiting for that. Wait, so you're saying because there's no compensation in grassroots football, it won't happen. But I guess the scenario you're painting is, as a parent, if you then just say, I'm leaving, my son's needs to play at a higher level, would you expect a coach then to say, all right, let me phone somebody I know to put him in the best environment to maximize his or her talent?
If that's done, that would be great. You know, I mean, it shows you probably have a good working relationship, or, you know, he's a great coach or something like that. But I don't think you should expect that to happen. I don't think you should expect that to happen, because, like Dan said, everyone in some way, shape, or form is in this for themselves. The coaches want glory. You know how good it feels for a coach when your team win a cup final, or you feel fantastic. You feel on top of the world. You feel great for the boys and everything like that, but you've got your own personal pride. That's the selfish element of you. When a kid scores a goal, free kick, penalty, or a worldie, or top corner, or whatever, or makes a good tackle, or that kid feels great. It might be good for the team, but individually, they feel the joy in themselves. And as a parent, when your kid does good, you feel great. You feel great. So that's the selfish element of it. That's where the emotional side of the selfish element comes in. And you want to get as many of those highs as possible. And with that, you want them to develop and do it more and more. And then you want them to do it on the bigger and harder stage to see how far it can really go. You know, it's you know, that's just life. That's not just that's actual life. That is just life in as it's set out as human beings. We all want to dominate. We all want to be better. We all want the best. We all want success. But with that comes sacrifice, tough decisions, and in the way Daniel said, you know, in some ways, a lot of selfishness.
There you go. I mean, it sounds like, in summary, there are good coaches, there are bad coaches, there are coaches that are indifferent. But you as a parent, you have the power, you have control. If you see something you don't like, if there is progress that your son isn't getting or making, and you can't have those conversations, don't be tired, don't be scared, feel empowered, contact Ade and make sure, no, I'm joking. But on a real, you have control, you have the power. The power is yours to make the right choice or a better choice for your child. And I think everything you say is fair, Ade. I think that was a fair question, Dan. I know as a coach, I would like to think that I would do that. But then as we were speaking, Dan, you and I discussed about my son and what we didn't do in a quarterfinal and semi-final of that last tournament. And that was because I know tournaments are different because it's not development, but at the same time, it was the will to win that made us make a bad decision. Yeah. Or maybe not the bad decision, maybe not the best decision. So I'm conflicted, and I'm leaning probably more to what Ade was saying and what you're saying, Dan, in the sense that maybe we wouldn't. Maybe a coach wouldn't do that. Even though they should, they probably wouldn't. So, yeah. Down to the parents to take control. I'm going to hand it back to you, Dej.
Yeah. Look, I think it's been a great debate, and I guess for me, just my final words is, even if they wouldn't and shouldn't, or it's not realistic, I think it's good to put it out there. You know, coaches are watching, and it's food for thought. You know, and what we want to do is we want to challenge challenge what is deemed to be the norm, and push the boundaries. What we want is exciting, creative individual coaches that bring out the best. And I think there's so much talent coming out of the grassroots game. and we need that talent to be looked after and to be nurtured properly. And I think as we started the stream earlier today, I think all of this comes down to communication. Having that communication, being able to have open and candid conversations could go a long way to addressing some of the issues that we've discussed tonight. But look, that concludes another episode of Ball at All Costs. Make sure you smash a like. Please give us your comments in the chat as well. How do you feel? Where do you stand? You've heard the debate this evening. Give us your comments. Also, give us some suggestions as well on other topics that you think you would like to hear from us.
Subscribe.
And on that note, we will see you again for another week on another episode. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. We are out.